point of order, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Board of Library Trustees will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. And here we have a list that was in the announcement that shows that there's a PATV access, the Zoom access, and some contact information and webinar information here. Okay. So can I have somebody, can I have the roll call, please?
Rick Shuhan?
Here.
Okay. Peter Bakula.
Present.
Kate O'Brien.
Here.
Ann Quinn.
Here. Can you hear me? I can't see my image, and I don't know if my microphone is working.
We can hear you and we can see you.
You can? Okay.
Yes.
Fine.
Don McAllister.
I'm here.
Stephanie Dallaire. Morgan Yo.
Here.
Fran Gallucci.
Here.
Stephanie Najjar. And Tom Pappas.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, do I have an approval of the minutes of the preceding meeting?
Motion to approve.
As the
Thank you, Fran.
critiquer, I'm happy to present.
And do I have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Anne. So I'll give you a minute to look over these minutes and we could have a discussion after that.
What happens if I do this?
Just know, Ian, that we can hear everything you say.
Okay.
And we can see you as well. Okay, I see everybody, almost everybody's looking up. Does that mean that we've gone through the minutes? All right, if we can, is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing no discussions, all in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Who was that first one? I'm sorry.
It was Fran or me. I'm not sure which, John or Fran.
All right, so we'll go with Don as a first and Fran as a second. And we can have a vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Oh, there I am.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And receipt of communications. I don't have any communications. Kate, do we have any communications?
Nothing, no.
Okay, there are no communications. We'll move on to the next agenda item, and that would be our library director, Kate Merlin. Thank you, Kate.
Good evening, everybody. I will just dive right in. Director's report to the Board of Library Trustees, March 2021. It's strange to read this report because last March, this was the meeting I was getting approved as library director, and then we shut down 2 weeks later. So it's kind of strange. Okay, so staffing. Staff remain 85% in the building and 15% working from home. We are beginning Zoom interviews for the new senior local history and public services librarian this week. As I notified you last month, a staff member tested positive for COVID-19 after experiencing symptoms. The Peabody Health Department identified 3 other library staff as possible close contacts, and all 3 of them began standard city isolation protocols. None of these 3 staff members experienced any symptoms, all tested negative and have returned to work. The ill staff member has also returned to work after observing the city's quarantine protocols. The library closed for one day, and all 3 locations were deep cleaned by our custodial staff. Patrons were notified of the suspension of services for one day and the precautions that were taken because of exposure, and were all very understanding. It was a scary few days for everyone, as our staff has been fortunate enough to avoid any illness for 11 months, but I am proud and thankful to state that our safety policies, masking and distancing protocols, and staff's diligence did their jobs to stop any spread of the disease. My thanks also to the Peabody Health Department and Human Resources Department for their guidance and help, the ill staff member for their immediate reporting of symptoms, the potentially exposed staff for their understanding and calm, and the library staff as a whole for their trust in the protocols that keep all of us safe. Budget. The current budget was included for your review, including the adjustments, the additions made at the February City Council meeting. Assistant Director Hayden and I are allocating the additional materials funds to library collections that were underfunded this year, as well as adding additional funds to our ebook collection. Budget proposals are due to the Finance Department on March 19th. That's for FY22. The mayor has requested that departments ask for level funding for FY22, which would optimistically mean no budget or staffing reductions for the library, but would also mean that we would still need to apply for another Mblc certification waiver for FY22. Our current and still diminished staffing levels will not allow us to return to our normal hours of operations at any of our 3 locations, so I hope to bring this up with President Pappas and the mayor soon. Mblc certification. The MVLC will vote on the approval of our FY21 waiver this Thursday, and I have no reason to believe our waiver won't be granted. As soon as I am notified of our state aid award, I will ask the trustees for the approval of funds allocations. And because we will likely receive state aid funds, I will also suggest in our next meeting that we restart Audubon print preservation, and we'll discuss this with the foundation at their April meeting as well, as they fund a portion of this project each year. State stimulus funds. I submitted the proposal for the usage of our state stimulus funds, and the proposal was approved by the state. These funds will be spent on technology and equipment to allow us to open safely and decrease physical touch points, as well as some operational expenses like the MeScan self-checkout system, Chromebooks for patron use, a new Jamex self-serve payment system. That's the standalone vending machine that you have to use to pay for print jobs and copier jobs. This one accepts cash, credit card, and mobile pay options. The old one had been out of commission for 2 years and necessitated that cash payments be made directly to staff before we close. So this is important. It also will pay for our March through June mobile network technology and access fees, and collections for the South Branch Library and West Branch Library, because materials funds were focused on the main library and online collections when the budget was cut and the branches did not reopen for curbside services. As a reminder, these funds do not factor into our city budget and therefore do not factor into the Mblc certification requirements. Reopening. Tonight, I am presenting the library reopening plan, which was developed by Assistant Director Hayden and myself with input from Trustee Policy Liaison Kate O'Brien. I'm also proposing an official face covering policy. I've emailed you both drafts and would like to go through them both with you. We'll do this later during new business, so not right now. I'm requesting tonight the discussion and approval of both of these policies so that planning and preparation may continue. President Pappas and I will be meeting with the mayor this coming Thursday afternoon and deciding upon a tentative timeline. None of our staff have been vaccinated yet. Please note that with our current staffing levels and assuming that the 1 day per week working from home ends, given the staff that will now be necessary to staff 2 public service desks at the main library, a new welcome desk, increased cleaning in our existing services, we will be able to reopen the main library at our current hours, so Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from 10 to 4. In order to open the South and West branches for limited days and hours, and to expand main library hours to include Mondays and/or evenings, part-time aides would need to be hired using the additional staffing funds that were transferred into our budget. And President Pappas and I will be discussing this with the mayor on Thursday as well. Senior Technology Librarian Yunan Guo has been working on readying the MeScan self-checkout system and other technology changes necessary to open safely. And I have begun to order plexiglass, hand sanitizer dispensers, and other equipment necessary to open safely. Our services, we continue to offer the following services: materials pickup, museum passes, 3D printing, document printing, library takeout, grab-and-go crafts, and expanded library of things. Programs. Last week, Senior West Branch Librarian Christy Bryant hosted an online vaccine information program with the Peabody Health Department, mayor, and various local health officials. The program was very well attended. Over 100 people attended via Zoom or watched on Facebook via PATV, and much important information about the safety of vaccines was shared with the public. I will be adding the slides from Sharon, Cameron, and Christy Bryant's presentation to our website this week. George Peabody's birthday card celebration was viewed online via our website or social media over 1,800 times, with over 200 people engaging online and over 50 people signing the card itself. These numbers are far higher than our usual online engagement and reach, and show that sharing our history and legacy with the community is successful in catching people's attention. Thank you to Assistant Director Hayden for spearheading, designing, and publicizing this initiative. And we hope that 2022's birthday celebration will be a combination of online and in-person festivities. The library's annual Peapod Seed Exchange will return in March in a slightly different form. During our pickup hours, patrons may come to a table outside the children's room entryway at the main library and take home the exact types and numbers of seeds they would like for their garden. The Peapod will return on March 23rd. And I continue to work on expanding our book delivery service, and we'll have more information at our April meetings. And then building and grounds. 2 main library courtyard light globes were damaged due to falling ice, and we are working with the facilities department to locate replacements. And finally, I have been working with the head of city facilities, Jim Hafey, to determine the best way to go about installing plexiglass to protect staff and patrons once we reopen, and how to best work with our layouts in all 3 buildings. Supplies necessary to reopen, such as plexiglass, hand sanitizer dispensers, social distancing stickers, etc., will be paid for using the city's CARES Act funds. The end.
And
Okay. I have a question regarding all the plexiglass. I
Yep.
think you mentioned it last meeting.
whoops,
The hand
Speak
sanitizer
up.
we're going to make available. And I'm sorry, I put the mic up. I'm sorry. So regarding the plexiglass and the other materials that you're going to be using, I think you mentioned it last meeting. So there's going to be some costs associated with that. Do you have kind of an estimate of how much all this extra sanitizer, wipes, and all this the PPE that you'll be offering the public if they don't have their own, like the masks?
All of the supplies that we need are going to be basically reimbursable by the state and federal CARES Act funds from earlier in the fiscal year. I basically, as I have been doing with all the supplies that we've purchased so far that are considered COVID related, which are essentially at this point just like our extra Zoom memberships that are directly COVID related, and the paper bags, the like $300 of paper bags we buy every couple of months, those are also reimbursed by the state's CARES Act funds, which are for COVID related costs. So I don't actually think the library's budget is going to be touched much by these necessary things. The hand sanitizer, we're getting freestanding hand sanitizer. We'll go into this later. When I go into the plan, but we're going to get freestanding hand sanitizer dispensers, and those run about 150 each, and we'll be getting about 12 of those, I believe. We're working right now to see if we can get a little discount. We also, the plexiglass is expensive. We're getting, the way we've decided to do this is 6 foot by 6 foot framed, freestanding and movable, like 23-pound plexiglass dividers, rather than putting a lot next to each other that have to stand on desktop, which are going to get knocked over. And those are like $300 each. It's going to be, probably $4,000 or $5,000, I would say total. I don't have a total yet. And the wipes and the hand sanitizer and the mask thus far have all come from the city. We've been getting it from the facilities department, school department. So I think the city is also just always, replenishing their supplies and passing on to us when we do need something. So I assume that these supplies will also be furnished by the city, which is also reimbursed by the CARES Act.
Okay, good.
So I don't think we're going to pay for much of this.
I'm glad. I hope we don't pay for a dime of it and it's covered. That would be terrific. I had one more question here. As far as the stimulus funds from the state, is that the same money that we just received through the grant, or is this something different?
So that's the state. We received money from the city, and then this is the state aid stimulus grant fund.
Okay.
There's like 4 different names for it, but it's the extra $75,000 that the mayor mentioned the last.
Yeah.
January,
Yep.
the last
No, I
meeting.
remember that. It's just called something different here. That's why I was asking.
It's changed names. I'm calling it the state stimulus funds because if I call it a grant, then it confuses all of us in the library because it's not really a grant. It's it's confusing. So I'm calling it the state stimulus funds from now on because it is part of a stimulus earmark program. Officially.
Thank you. That's all the questions that I have at this point. Anybody else have questions for our director? Diane?
Regarding the budget and the budget for next year, I don't understand. We've evaded or avoided the waiver hearing and all that for this year. So our budget going forward would be the same as this year at level funding.
Yeah. So
You imply that that's not going to be sufficient to help to
Correct.
keep us from a
So we
hearing next year.
So we did avoid the waiver hearing because we did not have over a 10% cut this year because we were just under 10% in the end.
Right.
Regardless of that, to get full Mblc certification without requiring a waiver, you need to have basically your budget every year needs to be the average of the last 3 years. Something called it's a requirement from the state that's essentially the average of the last 3 years budgets plus 2.5%. And so our budget this year was not the average of the last 3 budgets plus 2.5%. It was all of that minus 10% basically. So, and they do not, it's something called the MAR, the municipal, I'm blanking on the terms.
Some requirement.
Revenue or something like that. But basically they don't adjust that every year. So every year you go forward, you're still taking this budget from the last 3 years and adding 2.5%. And they don't actually take into account what your actual budget was. They take into account what they require that your budget be. So unfortunately, once you're in a situation like us, we've always hit that average of the last 3 years plus 2.5%. But unfortunately, when you get into a situation when you are municipally appropriated revenue, thank you. Assistant Director Hayden just reminded me, blinked on that. Going forward, basically every year, if we do not get, essentially this year, another 220,000 added to our FY22 budget, we'll apply for a waiver next year as well. And you get them, you get waivers every year. There are definitely communities that have received waivers like 10, 11 years in a row. But you do have to go through the whole process of applying for a waiver, all the paperwork and the testimonials and everything, not the actual horrible hearing, but the same process we've gone through this year. And so you get your state aid later and it becomes uncomfortable every year. And I fear that because we did have such a big cut this year, and it was obviously less than we thought it was going to be, we got very lucky there and we were very fortunate that more was added, but kind of going forward, unless we get a huge bump to our budget in the next few years, we're just going to get into a cycle of needing a waiver every year, which again, plenty of municipalities do this. I mean, not plenty, we're talking 4 or 5 or 6 statewide, apply for a budget every year kind of consistently because they had a giant cut once and then it was never fully brought back.
Right.
But the reason this policy exists is that the city does not cut a library 10% and then keep that 10% cut in perpetuity. The point is that the Mblc wants you to get up to level funding. It's like to full funding at some point because they don't consider our current, even if we were to get level funding, they do not consider this full funding. So it kind of just becomes a repeated process.
Are we likely to face the same kind of angst that we went through this year?
No, I don't think so.
It won't be that bad.
Because we will have gotten, I got a spreadsheet of all of the cities that were applying for a waiver, and they put on the spreadsheet, how many cities actually did get increase or get like 1% decrease, all the way down to like the cities that got the really bad increases. Our decrease for the state went from being number 2 in the state to number 5 in the state. So we did get a bit better statewide, even with the 10% still. But, there are libraries in the same that are getting voted on the same as us that were, at a level increase, but did not hit that requirement. And it will be easier. We'll probably get the waiver, but at some point it kind of gets stuck in like a cycle then of having to apply for a waiver every year, which isn't, ideal.
Thank you.
Okay, and Don, I believe you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Kate, I was wondering about one thing. I'm hearing that you're feeling comfortable that you'll be getting reimbursed by the state for all of the cleaning supplies, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But do you anticipate, based on your experience, that there'll be a long delay, that you may have to wait months and months? And is that going to affect your budget?
So the way it works actually is I've been given from the city finance director a specific account to charge all of those purchases to. So it's a city account that it all gets. Basically, all of those bills get sent to that account that's paid by the city.
So it's really City Hall's problem and not ours.
Pretty
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah. And what I've been told is that account is funded. I don't know how long that funding is going to last for kind of everybody combined. But so far so good. And I haven't been told that it's going to be, running short at any point or anything. So, and I think I'm sorry.
Just order stuff tomorrow then.
Pretty much. That's what we've been doing for the last couple of weeks. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have questions for our director?
I do.
Hi, Ann.
You mentioned in your report about a new welcome desk.
Yes, so that's part of the reopening plan that we'll get into during new business.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Just one thing, Anne brought up a point earlier when she was asking you a question, Kate, regarding the likelihood of falling below the budget for getting state certification. I think in our last meetings, when we went to the finance meeting and the council meeting, there's a councilman who said, I wish I had known about this in the very beginning. So as we're going through this cycle again, how soon do we reach the very beginning so we can start making people informed who are making the decisions on the budget?
So the letter that I received from City Hall, which is what every department had received last week, said basically what they do is they send me a spreadsheet of my current payroll, so I know what to look at for next year's payroll, just kind of like a baseline, and then what my current budget is, and essentially a spreadsheet where I can just fill in what I'm requesting for each budget line, and then I need to give reasoning behind that. And the letter specifically stated that the mayor is requesting that every department head require level funding for next year, but then also keep into consideration any key mission-driven costs that you might need, and we'll discuss that. So it sounds like there is a possibility to discuss with the mayor and with finance missions. I think it's like it talks about mission-specific costs for your department. I mean, I would argue that staff to run 3 branches is mission-specific, but that's just
how soon does this budget have to be put together?
So this needs to be sent to City Hall on the 19th. I was hoping, Tom, that in our meeting on Thursday, this meeting that we're having the mayor about potentially reopening, a lot of this is wrapped around staffing as well, because there's really only so much we can do right now. And then with that additional money we were given, and then that still really limits us going forward. So there's it's one of these things where it's a kind of a circular argument and a circular conversation. So I'm working on, Assistant Director Hayden, I'm sorry, and I've been working on what we need to reopen now, what we need to reopen the branches, and what we need to expand hours and get to our normal levels of operations. And we know we have those numbers, and we have those numbers of people and the numbers of hours and everything. It's just a matter of seeing what is going to be permitted to add it back in.
Okay.
So I think soon. I mean, I think that, we can get a feel on Thursday, I think, for how this is going to go this year and what the city's budget overall is looking like, and then go from there. But basically the budget process starts like today, essentially.
Thanks, Kate.
We had about a month to breathe and catch our breaths.
Yeah.
I hope you all enjoyed that. I certainly did.
So does anybody else have questions for Kate, our director? All right, thank you. So do I have a motion to accept the director's report?
So moved.
Thank you, Don. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Anne. Any further discussions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kate. All right, so that brings us now to the reports of the subcommittee. One second here. So building and grounds. Rich?
Nothing further to add except for what the library director mentioned.
All right, thank you, Rich. Audubon prints, Anne?
Nothing to report beyond what the director said about reestablishing the conservation program, but that's going to be pending the meeting of the foundation in April.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Personnel, Don?
Nothing more than was said in the director's report.
Thank you. Policies and procedures, Kate O'Brien.
Kate is going to share more under new business.
Thank you. Liaison to the Friends and of the Peabody Institute Library, Morgan Yo. You're on mute, Morgan.
I'm mute.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Morgan. Liaison to the Peabody Institute Library Foundation, Trustee Dejar. I'm sorry, Stephanie's not here. And the Historical Society. We don't have Stephanie is here as well. Okay, and I haven't heard anything from the Historical Society. All right, do I have a motion to accept all of the committee reports?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Ann. Do I have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Don. Any discussion further? Okay, go ahead, Kate. You have a you just raised your hand, Kate O'Brien?
Oh, no, I was just saying yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. All right, this brings us to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business that somebody would like to bring up? Okay, I'm hearing none. I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. New business. As stated earlier, Kate Merlin, our director, would like to talk about the reopening plan. And there's also a face covering policy, which I think Kate O'Brien has something to do with here, right? So why don't we start with the director's reopening plan. Kate, please.
I'm going to share my screen. I sent this PDF of these beautiful slides that Assistant Director Hayden put together, but I'm going to share my screen so everybody watching can see this as well, in case you didn't get a chance to read that. So bear with me. Did this work? Can you see my screen? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So welcome to our reopening plan draft. This basically what this does is this goes through the plan that Assistant Director Hayden and I have been working on for a while now, taking into account how this disease spreads, what the spring is likely to look at, our staffing levels, our buildings, what our patrons need, how our patrons function. And we think this is the best way to go about this. I know every library is different. Some libraries are going about this. Some libraries that have already opened for some limited services are going about this in a totally different way. And I do believe that every library director is doing what's best for their community and their library and their staff. So please believe that we think this is the best. No pressure, but here we go. So reopening plan, this is the draft. So basically, the gist of this is that we closed a year ago. For a full year, we worked tirelessly to reinvent the library to serve our residents in new, innovative ways. The following reopening plan takes into account everything we have learned about the virus and transmission, how we can best keep library patrons and staff safe, what our patrons need from us, and how our buildings are best services to provide what they need from us. We believe that by safely opening in a controlled manner and offering services and collections for public use at all 3 library locations, patrons and staff will be able to experience the Peabody Institute Library in a familiar way while being able to choose their preferred way of interacting with staff and technology. All 3 library locations have been included in this plan, and while not all spaces or services will initially be available to the public, we believe that this plan offers the ideal balance of safety and access for our patrons at this time, and will keep our staff safe as they once again welcome our Peabody community back inside our 3 buildings. Feel free to stop and raise your hand if you have any questions along the way. So the basics of the plan. Basically, once that it's been determined that it's safe to open the library, and that's a whole nother discussion that we're going to start having with the mayor, and it's a whole nother can of worms there. But once it's been determined safe to open the library, and specifically after all of the new MeScan self-checkout technology and plexiglass barriers have been installed, 2 weeks will be needed to implement this plan before reopening day. That's to get our staff trained, our staff, knowing what happens in every single location, to start publicizing to the public and our patrons that they can come back in and how that's going to work, to kind of get that marketing done as well. In phase 1, the main library will open to the public, hours to be determined, and then with the South Branch and West Branch, each opening 2 weeks later for phase 2. And that allows us to kind of get the kinks out at the main library to figure out best practices and what needs to be adjusted before we move to these other 2 buildings. Something that's discussed a lot, there are limits right now by the state that libraries can have 50% of their normal occupation, not including employees. Our buildings are really large, and honestly, the chances of us hitting 50% is very low. And given our staffing levels and what would be necessary to track attendance of patrons, and also the likelihood of patron confusion and lack of being able to access our website to make appointments or give us a call or speak the language, we don't think it's possible or even worth it to track attendance. With the likelihood of patron confusion regarding limits and appointments, and given that each building is unlikely to reach state order capacity limits, staff will not limit the number of patrons in the building, nor require a set time limit for in-building activities. Certain services and spaces will not be available to the public during phase 1 and phase 2, and staff will regularly remind patrons that lingering is not allowed. Staff will not monitor patrons for illness, as they are not medical professionals, and staff will not ask patrons for personal information due to privacy considerations, and because any interaction in the library will be very short and safe by design, and therefore unlikely to be relevant to possible contact tracing. And that has been discussed with and improved by the Peabody Health Department. Masks will be required for all persons inside the library and will be offered to anyone who arrives without one. Any patron who is unable to wear a mask will be offered accommodations by staff and will be asked to leave the building. All staff desks will be protected by plexiglass barriers. And then in addition to our current cleaning protocols, patron high-touch surfaces such as computers, copier, fax machine, etc., will be disinfected after each use, and cleaning supplies will also be available for patrons. Freestanding hand sanitizer dispensers will be available throughout every building.
I have a question, quick,
I have one too.
about that business about cleaning after every use and such. Who's going to do that?
So staff, library staff.
Staff?
Yep. The computers, we're going to be limiting computers to 1 hour with no extensions available. We think that an hour is a reasonable amount of time to do something important like apply for benefits or, do schoolwork or write a resume. And then after that 1 hour time limit is up, the computer will shut down, and then we will do spraying and cleaning and wiping down the staff who's comfortable doing that. And then we'll also have cleaning supplies available at each computer, so patrons, when they sit down, can give it an extra wipe if they feel more comfortable doing that.
I had a question on the Me-Scan self-checkout.
Mhm.
How many self-checkout stations will be in each branch?
So that's that gets until later when we talk about specific spaces, but basically each of the branches, the South branch and the West branch, will each have one station to be at the main desk because of the space limitations there and the fact that it's really only one room. The main library will have one down in the children's library, one at the main public services desk in the main reading room, and then one in the courtyard lobby, which is where we're going to have all holds pickups and this welcome desk to kind of tell people what's available and where they can go. So 3 at the main library and then 1 at each branch, so 5 total. And then the one that's in the courtyard lobby at the main library in the distant future when the world is back to normal, we can actually do outreach. That's a portable one. So we actually are going to be able to take that out into the community and, again, in the future, take books and materials out to community events or to schools or whatever, and actually allow people to check things out off premises as well. But for right now, it's going to be used for self-checkouts of holds.
Okay.
Any other questions before I go on to the next page?
Kate, just one thing. I understand the computers are going to be on a time limit, so you will know approximately when client A leaves,
right,
so that you can clean. But with the copy machine and et cetera, isn't that going to be hard to? I'm sure you thought of this much more deeply than I have. But how are you going to be able to monitor that? I mean, someone comes over quickly, makes a copy.
The copy machine is right next to the main desk. It's like literally
Okay,
up next to the main desk. So we're just going to have to keep an eye out. I was talking to another library director the Reading Library, who's a little bit ahead of us because of the location of their library and it's a newer building. And she said that this really was a test of her staff situational awareness. And so they all got very used to, she said that their teen librarian was always used to saying like, I'm vaguely aware of the fact that 5 teenagers went in there and only 3 came out, which as a former teen librarian, I totally get that. But you kind of lose that skill a little bit. You're not always aware of what's going on around you, but I think that our staff will just naturally get to the point when they have an unconscious and conscious idea of who's everywhere at all times. Because we'll be keeping an eye out for those kind of things. And we'll have, spray cleaner right next to the copier. And whenever a patron leaves, we will invite them to wipe it down themselves, or they can, we can zip out and do that for them. And then a patron can also do it for themselves before they use it. So it'll just be an issue of keeping an eye on things basically and being aware of it constantly.
Yeah, I didn't have a better idea. I was sure if you looked at it, but that's
no. Please ask me those questions because we've done a lot of this asking back and forth of each other. What if? But I'm sure we've missed things. So please ask me the questions so I can be sure to add them because I don't want to miss any little thing that could cause problems or confusion going forward.
Question?
Yep.
A question about all this cleaning that's going on. I just wonder if all day long you're spraying the copier and the fax machine, and it's a big danger to the electronics of the thing by being exposed to having all this moisture.
We're going to be doing, it's going to be a combination of spraying and using antibacterial wipes. And we've been doing it the whole time and nothing's happened. And I think every business everywhere has been doing the wipes and the spray, and there have been no adverse effects that we've noticed. And my guess is all these computers are kind of made for this because they're high use public machines. I don't think there will be any problems. I hope not. Any other questions on this first page? So far, so good. All right, page 2. So just continuation of the basics. As I mentioned, computer use will be limited to 1 hour, and this is at all the branches with no time extensions. And we will encourage patrons to call ahead to reserve their computer times. If a patron arrives without a computer reserved and a computer is available, they may use it. If no computers are available, staff can assist patrons in making an appointment, so they may return at another time, as no lingering to wait for computer availability will be allowed. That's not to say if somebody arrives and wants to use a computer and we can tell when people's computer time is up, we can look on our system and say, well, computer 2 has 20 minutes left. We can easily put a reservation in our system and say, if you're welcome to browse for books for 20 minutes or go outside for 20 minutes, we're not going to kick the person out, but they can't just stand around waiting for a computer. They have to be moving around or outside of the building or go get, a cup of coffee and come back across the street. We're not going to kick people out, but we don't want people to just sit around and wait. We're not going to have any chairs or any seating to encourage lingering anyway. So staff will frequently monitor publicly accessed areas and remind patrons to keep their masks on, and signage regarding masks and distancing will be prevalent. Signage and staff will request that patrons put all unwanted materials in designated areas so that they may be quarantined before being reshelved. And then all public chairs and tables will be removed except for computers to discourage lingering. Any questions, all right, about those basics so far?
Good.
So far, so good? Okay. So this is phase 1. Basically, the following procedures and plans must be in place before the main library can reopen to the public. Adequate staff must be hired and trained to allow for safety and public services. Standard wording for patron rules will include masks are worn at all times upon entering and remaining in the building, regardless of vaccination status. Time limits on computers must be adhered to. Lack of rule following will result in patron being asked to leave, and then no food or drink will be allowed to be consumed inside the building. We have to figure out and set up the designated spaces within the main library for holds, pickup, and quarantines, and we have that all ready to go. Training for staff on appropriate technology adaptions like MeScan, and then a remote computer help so we can help patrons on public computers from our own staff computers by kind of dialing into their computer without having to actually lean over them like in the olden days. We need to procure appropriate supplies, so bags and bins to keep the system touchless, PPE for all staff, sanitation supplies, and these are things that we're currently working on and placing orders and orders and orders. Sufficient supply of masks for patrons who wish to enter the building and do not have a mask to wear. Our continued quarantining is still in place. We're going to have to block off alternating public computers, and we're placing plexiglass between the carrels so people aren't sneezing on each other. We're placing social distancing markings on the floor for anticipated waits at service desks. And then once this reopening plan has been approved by trustees and city management, this is actually incorrect here. There's a minimum 2-week time period. It's going to take a lot longer than 2 weeks. We're not at 2 weeks yet. So scratch this last part. That it's supposed to say,
Go over that.
sorry? That last line that says once the reopening plan has been approved, there's a 2-week time period. Basically what that means, what that should say is once it's been determined that it's safe to open the library, there's a minimum 2-week time period after that in which to get everything in place. We can't just, flip the switch overnight. So I need to switch the language at the end there.
Point where you're talking about continued quarantining. Does that mean quarantining of staff or
no, continued quarantining of materials that are returned or touched by
materials?
Yep.
Okay. You might want to put that in materials. Okay.
Any other questions on that page? And then at the bottom, the south and west branches will be phased in after 2 weeks of the main library reopening. Again, so we can get everything under control at the main, make sure everything works. And all of our very carefully laid plans are effective, and then expand it to the branches. So then we get into the main library zones of access versus no access, and the proposed usage for the space in phase 1 at the main library. So the most important area is this new area, this new use of the courtyard entryway lobby. It's usually been a place where it's the elevator lobby, basically. When you come in off the courtyard, it's kind of that weird triangular space with a giant portrait of George Peabody. In the past, it hasn't really been used for much. There's like a display case in there. When we started the PillCon Comic-Con event a couple years ago, we used that as a welcome area, as the check-in, and it was wonderful. Morgan, you'll probably remember that. It was big and it was welcoming, and it was a great kind of central location for people to come into the library and have somebody to touch base with, and then go on their merry way, either get on the elevator or go through the hall to the teen room or main room. And I think we all kind of developed a new appreciation for this kind of weird triangular space that had just been a pass through before. So that area is being cleaned out right now, and has been, and stuff has been moved around. And that is going to be where all of our holds are going to be. So our contactless hold pickup process is going to change. People are still going to place holds online or over the phone, and we will grab all their holds and put them in a bag and label them. And then a patron will get notified that their books are ready. That's the same as it's always been. Instead of a patron having to contact us and make an appointment and come during a certain period of time, basically a staff member is going to just take the bag of holds and put it on a shelf in alphabetical order out in the courtyard lobby. So then a patron, once they know their things are ready, they know that their bag is waiting for them, and they will come whenever the library is open, grab their bag, and then we'll have a me-scan self-checkout station out in that lobby as well, where patrons can grab their bag, check out their materials to themselves, and go on their merry way. So they can basically still do contactless pickup without having to really come into the library past that little entryway right there, past that first door. So I think a lot of patrons at the beginning may not feel comfortable coming all the way into the main room to check out books to grab their hold. So this gives them a way to do it really quickly and safely. And the door will be open all the time, so lots of airflow in there. We're also going to have a welcome desk in there against the wall, which is basically kind of a touch point for patrons. They'll come in, and that will be one of the 2 entry points, because we are going to block off the front door of the library because it's hard to kind of control that entrance. So we'll ask people to go around the corner, come in through the lobby entryway, and then they'll see the staff member sitting there with a computer. And the staff member can greet people, remind people to wear their masks, tell them what services are available, what spaces are available, what aren't available, all behind a 6 foot by 6 foot giant plexiglass screen, of course. Point to where things are. If somebody point to where the holds are across the room, if somebody does not feel comfortable using self-checkout or has questions, the staff member is able to check the books out for them. So kind of like it's a welcome station. It's like a concierge, basically. And that will be staffed by 1 person at a time at a small desk. Very cordoned off from the world. But we think that's a good idea. Then kind of walking through the library, the teen room will not be open for browsing. That's still our quarantine area, and we have staff desks in there as well. And we don't have anywhere else to put the quarantine books right now, and it's a really good system. We also feel it's a small enough collection, no offense to the teen collection, but it's a small enough collection that if somebody wants help, a staff member can usually go in and grab the books that they want for them. Into the main reading room then. The public computers, only every other computer will be in use, so 6 computers total. 1 hour time limits strictly enforced to ensure cleaning between uses. And again, appointment only, but if there is a computer that's open, you can jump on it, that's fine. The main reading room and public services desk, it is available to patrons for, again, the public services desk will be available for checkouts and for staff help behind these giant 6 foot by 6 foot plexiglass screens. They can also do checkouts for patrons as well through pass-throughs in the glass, but we are going to encourage people to use one of the new me-scan self-checkout stations, and they can also browse the collections on the first floor. That's also where the copier is and the fax machine and all that more high-tech technology as well that staff can keep an eye on. Up to the 2nd floor, the Sutton room and the staff area and the tech lab are not going to be open to the public. Normally they wouldn't be anyway, but they certainly are not now because we have a lot of staff desks spread out in that area that weren't that wasn't in use before. Second floor fiction stacks, we are going to open for browsing. We feel it's a small enough area and easy enough for staff to wander through to monitor that we feel comfortable allowing patrons up there. And again, no tables or chairs or any way for anybody to linger or do anything up there, just kind of grab their book and go. The third floor stacks, we are not opening to patrons. That's the third floor nonfiction on both sides of the building, both the new and old side. We figure that gets too far away for staff to monitor to make sure masks are staying on and rules are not being broken. And staff will be available to retrieve holds for patrons or get books for them or assist the patrons in that way and get requests for patrons, but they will not be open for patrons for browsing at the beginning. And then down to the children's library, it will be open as normal for browsing and checkouts, either through a me-scan station or the staff behind the 6x6 foot pieces of plexiglass at the desk. Public computers will not be available there, and therefore printing won't be available. So it's just browsing and checking out there. Creativity Lab is not going to be open to the public because that's all about small groups of people. So no, thank you, not quite yet. And then the main entrance on Main Street, as I said, will be locked and closed off, and there will be signs directing people to go around the corner to go in through that main, that lobby entry. Limiting going from 3 entryways to 2 entryways, we think will make it easier to keep an eye on patrons and have a general idea of who's in the building. And also easier for when patrons come into the children's room, they'll have that children's room staff right there to greet them from behind the plexiglass and tell them the rules and how this works. Same thing with the main lobby. It's not feasible to have 3 entrances right now with the staffing and with the safety precautions that need to be in place. Any questions about that before I take a big drink of water? So far, so good? Okay. And then the main library services available during phase 1. Public computer usage, as I said, 1 hour time limit, alternating carols only. Staff are available for remote assistance at the public services desk with assistive software. So as I said, basically, we have a way for our computers to log into their computers and see their screen and also kind of like take control of their computer and move the mouse around for them. I know other libraries are using really technologically advanced laser pointers to stand really far behind patrons and point to where they need to, click on the screen, and we may end up using that as well, but from far away. Browsing will be available in the main reading room, second floor fiction stacks, and children's library only. And again, we're going to have bins and signs everywhere asking people to not reshelve books themselves, but having them put them aside so they can be quarantined due to any contamination before being reshelved. Holds pickups will all be available in the Courtyard lobby. And again, that's self-serve, come in, grab your bag, check them out yourself and leave, or ask the staff member at the welcome desk to do it. There will be no holds behind the public services desk in the main reading room. It's all going to be out in the Courtyard lobby. Chromebook checkouts,
I have a question.
ordered a ton of 20 Chromebooks, and we have them and we're just processing them right now and getting them all set up. And so patrons, if a patron comes in and a laptop or a computer is not available, we'll offer to them the option to check out a Chromebook instead and take it home to do work on a computer in their home versus in the library instead of waiting around for a computer. The library of things, patrons can browse them just like our other items. There's a display set up in our main reading room, so browsable, but in public with other people keeping an eye on them. Magazines and newspapers are not going to be available because they're hard to clean, basically. Copying is still available. It'll be wiped down after each usage. And then our new mobile and credit card payment Jamex kiosk or vending machine, I guess, will make it easier to not have, it'll be all as touchless as people want to make it, basically, not just cash-based. Faxing, we still have a fax machine that's available for credit card transactions that also is going to need to be cleaned after every use. And then we're still going to be doing remote printing. So printing documents and 3D items for staff members. And that's going to be available at the public services desk. And they're going to have to present an ID for pickup as we do now. Any questions about their services so far?
Okay, I have a question about the browsing. So if I'm up there on the second floor fiction, and I'm sort of looking around and picking off a book and looking at it and putting it back, are those items subject to quarantine? And how are you going to deal with people?
So we can only ask people to follow the rules, and it's the same everywhere. We're going to have signs everywhere and obviously really obnoxiously labeled carts at the end of every row, basically saying, like, do not put your own book back on the shelf. let us do the work for you. We need to quarantine these things also. So we're going to have these books that go on carts and then go down in our quarantine room for a week. And it makes it a little tedious because these books that will show up on our shelves as available will not actually be on the shelf for a week, but it's kind of what we have to do. So we're just going to have to go with it. And when staff is looking for holes, they're just going to have to remember to check the quarantine room and check the shelves. And it's either that or nothing, unfortunately, for browsing. And, at some point, quarantining times may go down and there may be a library movement to reduce quarantining, but every library in Noble is pretty much still doing this 5 to 7 day quarantine period just to be safe. So for now, we're just going to have to live with it. And it'll be irritating, but.
Kate, I have a question. I'm sorry if I missed it, but there's a couple of things. How about like door handles and doorknobs, high touch areas? Is anybody going to be cleaning those up? That's number one. And number two, and this comes from going to sports events at the school, is that when you walk in, they have a sign-in station, which I'm not proposing that you do, but they also make you put some hand sanitizer on before you go in.
Sorry, I need to include that. You're right. We are doing that. So
you are okay.
Hand sanitizer, yes, there's going to be a hand sanitizer station at both entrances, and basically we have, I think, we're going to have 6 or 7 at the main library alone, essentially in all the stairwells and outside the restroom, and at the children's checkout and the children's entry. There will be hand sanitizer dispensers everywhere. And when you enter, we will ask you to do that. I have to add that. You're right.
Thank you.
But no sign-ins, we can't do that.
No.
Your first question. Our custodians are currently wiping down those high-touch surfaces currently for staff that are in the building. Basically, also, we're just going to prop doors open as much as we can. I don't think that patrons are going to be touching things other than the elevator, and we're going to have, we have to add elevator. For the elevator, we're going to have signs that saying, like only one party in the elevator at a time, and they will be touching things, but we'll have hand sanitizer there available and encouraged to use. We're just going to be on rotations of spraying everything down as often as we can get through the rotation. But as many doors and stairwells as can be propped open as possible, basically. And we'll just continue with the normal routine of wiping things down and walking around in circles and wiping and wiping and wiping and wiping. There's a constant rotation, which is necessary. So,
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. I have to add those in. Absolutely.
Kate, I had one more question. I think I can understand in the reading areas where you'll have staff that things can be monitored. And if you have the cards for them to return a book, they're not taken out. I can follow that. But I'm just totally unable to imagine how in the children's room. I mean, how many staff are you going to have in the children's room?
At least 2 at all times.
Wow.
And it's the room, it's another one of those things, we're just going to have to hope that people follow the rules. And if not, we're going to have to ask them not to return until they can follow the rules for everybody's safety. And honestly, from experience, kids are not great at putting books back on the shelves anyway. And we probably don't want them to, because I have a 3-year-old and she's not great at putting books back on the shelf in the correct order. So we're just going to have to make sure we tell the kids, like, it's okay to be lazy and messy and, leave your books in a pile. We'll take care of it for you. We're just going to have to keep an eye on people. And my guess is also this far into the pandemic, a year in, people are kind of used to these rules everywhere. People are used to at stores, you being requested to not put your own stuff back and to leave things so other people can take care of it. I think if it were October, it would be, people are kind of still learning how this works. I'm just hoping that people are, listen to our rules and understand them and are willing to follow them with just a little bit of prompting from us. And I think patrons also understand that, each book is not, bleached when it's taken off the shelf. Like we, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had to remind patrons all the time, just for everybody's comfort, that a minimum of staff are handling your books as they put them in your bag for pickup. However, staff are handling your books as they put them in the bag for pickup. People are touching things as little as possible, but it still happens. There's still human interaction. So we also hope that people are doing their due diligence when they take the books home, to either let them cure, as we call it, for a little bit, or spray them down or wipe them down, or just wait a couple days. We just have to hope people follow the rules, basically. I think that.
No, I understand, and I think you've been very creative in your ways of handling the situation, and I give you and the staff a lot of credit for that. I was just concerned about the kids, but all you can do is what you're doing, and you don't want to block their access
Right.
from learning how to read. So, I understand where you're coming from, and I can't think of a better way either. That would be legal. So,
Yeah,
So
so we
thank
just
you.
kinda have to hope, and set books aside and hope that kids are happy to be able to be messy and leave piles of books on the ground, basically.
you can probably count on that.
Right, I know. It's not going to be a stretch. So.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on this page so far? So far, so good? Okay. So then we get to the branches. And again, this is a couple weeks after the main library actually opens, so we can get everything organized. So zones of access versus no access. South branch, they're pretty much the same for both branch because they're, essentially a similar layout. South branch, front entryway is going to be the entry and exit. I think that we are going to, we're still discussing whether we want to allow both doors to be open at the South branch. I think we go back and forth on this, but I think they're going to both probably have to be open at the South branch. But the main entryway will obviously be open, and the other one as well. The main space is basically everything's going to be open at the branches except for the programming rooms due to the lack of spaces. So the main space is going to be, there's going to be a display close to the main desk for the contactless holds pickup and the self-checkout station. And then they can also go to the main desk if they need, if patrons can also go to the main desk if they want a staff member to help check out their books instead. Also open for browsing, and something that the staff's just going to have to do rounds and make sure that people in the back corners are keeping masks on and following the protocols. Public computers, only 2 are going to be in use. Again, 1 hour time limits for cleaning. Community room is going to be closed, and that is the current quarantine area at the South branch, and it will continue to be so no programming in that room. The children's area will be open for browsing, but no children's toys or anything, and all tables and chairs are going to be taken out. Same thing at the west. Entryways for entry and exit, main space for contact holds pickup and checkout and browsing, and then a me-scan station next to the self-serve holds. Public computers, every other computer are going to be in use, so only 2 there as well. 1 hour time limits. Community room will be closed, still used as a quarantine area, and the children's area will be open, but for browsing, no toys, no seating or anything like that.
Just for clarification purposes, Kate, when on the bottom of it, there's a note of this on this slide.
Yep.
It says there will be required at all times in all spaces of the 2 people, 2 staff members.
Yeah.
What does that mean in all spaces?
So that means that in the normal times, we would never have any desk. We would try to at least not have any desk ever manned by 1 staff member, unless other person was going to the bathroom for safety and security and comfort reasons, basically. And we're continuing that now as well. And at the branches, that means that there will need to be 2 people at the desk, or 1 person at the desk and 1 person wandering around, reminding patrons to keep their masks on, or at least within view at all times. So there's never 1 person in charge of the entire space at the branches, especially. That doesn't apply to the welcome desk in the main lobby at the main library, just because there's not enough room for 2 people out there to be 6 feet apart. But at the branches, there is enough room for 2 people to be present. Whether it's at the same, at the main desk 6 feet apart, or 1 in an office within view. We just don't want anybody by themselves ever.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any questions about that? The spaces? Great. So then the services available, same as at the main library, basically. Computer use, 1 time limit only, a 1 hour time limit alternating carols, remote assistance with assistive software or the good old laser pointers. Browsing, the adult and teen stacks, new books, DVDs, children's section. So basically everything open for browsing at the branches because it's essentially 1 room. Holds pickup, still the self-serve, the same idea. It's going to be definitely a learning curve for staff and patrons. All of a sudden, from only being able to pick up holds at the main library, they will now all of a sudden be able to pick up holds at the south or the west branches like the olden days, but it's going to be a new process for them to kind of remember, and for us to remember to start transferring books back and forth. But it'll be the same. There will be a display with bags with names on them, and patrons can come in and grab their books and check them out to themselves, whenever it's convenient. Magazines and newspapers not available. Copying available for use. Wipe down after each usage. We're working on getting the snazzier Jamexes for credit card transactions at the branches. There might be a bit of a delay on that though, but we're working on that. And then remote printing, same thing. People can send documents to pick up at the branches as well. And then the contactless self-serve pickup, the new process is actually a lot easier for everybody. I mean, kind of paring this down every couple months as we get used to this and refining the process. So when we reopen, patrons can place holds and retrieve their own materials without making an appointment. So that makes it a lot easier for them. They can place holds online, through the catalog, over the phone. In phase 1, they can pick them up at the main library. In phase 2, they can pick them up at all 3 library locations. When a patron receives notifications that their items are ready, they may arrive at their preferred pickup location during the open hours and then proceed to the designated pickup space. That's the courtyard entrance at the main library, and then displays at each of the branches by the public services desk. Upon arrival, patrons can either, wander into the library, go grab all the books from the stack, do their computer use, and then come check out, and then come at the end, grab their stack of books and check out everything to themselves, both the books in their bag and the books that they have grabbed off the shelves, or they can just grab the bag right there, check the books out to themselves and leave without actually coming further into the library. We're going to encourage them to use the MeScan self-serve checkout kiosks. That's the whole point, to cut down on a touch point with patrons and staff. There's also a phone app that comes with this program that we're learning as well, where patrons can download the MeScan app on their phone and sign in to their account. And then if they enable their location services while in one of our buildings, their phone, their private mobile phone turns into a book scanner essentially. So they can open the app, turn on their location services, and actually check books out to themselves in the library, which is pretty cool. So that's something that patrons can do in the stacks or the main reading room and check books out on their own account without having to even come to a MeScan station.
Question, Kate. I'm sorry if I should know the answer to this, but do you have magnetic strips on the books?
Some,
for
yes.
security. Okay, so
We
there's
do,
not
yeah.
going to be any need for disabling the security strips, right?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, a lot of libraries have switched to RFID checkout systems recently,
Yeah.
which makes it more secure. We are not in a place to do that right now.
Okay.
I think that this is just going to be a lot easier for patrons, but there's really no need for dealing with magnetic strips currently.
All right.
So it's pretty basic still.
Thank you.
Kate? I've seen a mention of privacy in a couple of places, I think in your report earlier and here. And I just have a question. What is the business of patron privacy? I mean, I know you don't want the FBI coming in and checking on who's checking out which books. And is that what it's all about?
So in terms of the FBI, I mean, we do not keep any records of patrons' checkout histories. That's
Right.
a library policy.
So is that what this?
No, that refers to if, a kid comes in and needs books about, what's happening to their body and they feel uncomfortable coming to the desk and handing these books to some lady because they're embarrassed. Instead, they can do it without having to come in contact with staff and without giving up their privacy. If somebody is looking for books about divorce and they know somebody who works at the desk and they don't want to give those books about their private life to somebody to check out,
Right.
and, library policies state, and we abide by these because we know how important they are, that we do not look at what people are checking out. We do not comment on it. We don't remember it. We don't keep track of it.
Right.
We are
Right.
basically, when they are giving books to us, it is anonymous as it can be based on our training and our policies and what we as librarians believe in. But I understand if people want that extra level of privacy where they don't want a living person to ever see what books they've checked out. So that's what we're concerned about. And I know that as a former teen librarian as well, there are lots of kids that were checking out books about really tough concepts. And my goal as a teen librarian was to change the nonfiction section. So I always said that if I never helped a kid find a nonfiction book that was good, because that meant they were able to find them on their own, because there were kids checking about books about family issues and eating disorders and abuse and really horrible things that they would not have felt comfortable asking me about. So we want to give people an extra level of privacy. If they don't want me to see the books they're checking out, even though I won't comment or care, I feel that it's important to offer that to people.
And that's what this system allows, the MeScan thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't keep track.
Absolutely not. The way our systems work is we on the library's end never keep track of what books are being checked out. There's an option on the patron end. I have it enabled for my personal account where you can keep track of your own personal holds history or checkout history. So if you've read the same book 3 times, but it's something that's only enabled on the patron's end and is never accessed by library staff.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions about this so far? And then the last page is just the quarantining, the process we've been doing since July now, for what, 9 months? Time flies. So basically, items get returned to a book drop. We put them on a quarantine table labeled with that day, and then they stay on a patron's account for that full week before getting checked back in a week afterwards by staff. And patrons at the beginning, there was obviously a bit of a learning curve for all of us. And we still have patrons who were like, hey, I turned that book in, 7 days ago, and we explained the process. And we're not charging fines right now, so there's never any issue. I think anybody who's used a library in the last year knows this is just how it goes. And it's kind of common practice at this point. And I think that's it. We did it. Thank you, everybody.
That's a fantastic job
Wow.
that you and Al did. It's very thorough, well thought of, and every detail is covered here.
We tried.
Amazing.
And I'm definitely, we've given a lot of walkthroughs and what if. Again, I know other libraries are doing appointment-based or, only 3 people in whatever space at the same time. We just don't have the logistics to do that, and I don't think it's necessary. I feel that we have enough patrons who would not be able to access the internet or even know to call us to make an appointment to use the library for an hour or something like that. We have enough patrons that don't speak English as comfortably, who would not know how to access these things. We have people based on age who just don't have access to, don't understand this technology. And I think it would create a real access issue if we required appointments for our patron base, especially downtown. And I also feel that, if you have appointments and the appointments start at 10 o'clock, you're going to have however many people you've allowed in show up right at 10 o'clock to check in at the same time, and then be in the library at the same time, and then at 10:59 have to leave and check out their books. I feel like it'll create log jams in all of our spaces and log jams on the computers. I really feel that having people come in on their own staggered schedules will allow us to, have a friendlier space as well. We're not going to have to stop people at the door and say, well, you're not allowed in because you didn't make an appointment. And I dread that. I dread having to, say you're not welcome in the library. And it's not because they're not welcome, it's just because they don't know the rules. And I don't want to create any more access issues for anybody. If people want to come in and grab a book and use a computer, they're welcome to do it as long as they follow the rules. I just don't want to make it, I don't want to cause any issues between staff and patrons while we're explaining the rules and somebody's really frustrated because they have to do something. Can't we just let them in really quickly and then having to bend rules? I just feel like it will cause more problems than it's worth. And I don't think that a library set up as ours will be without places to study and without places to sit and linger. It's going to be clearly a very transactional library for a while, where you come in, you grab your books, you grab your holds, you make your copy and you leave. This is not going to be a place that people want to linger by design, because we don't want people lingering in public spaces yet. It's not time for that yet. So I feel like I really truly feel this is the best way to do it and the safest way to do it. And I think it'll be fine. I'm obviously nervous. And we don't have a timeline for this yet. I know the schools are negotiating as we speak about bringing the kids back in person. The absolute earliest we could consider opening the public based on everything that has to be installed and purchased and trained and technologied and everything is mid-April. And that is pushing it. That's very early. None of our staff have been vaccinated yet. I know obviously we won't be able to wait until we're all vaccinated, because I'm not going to get vaccinated until August at this point. So I'm not under, I don't, we can't wait until we're all vaccinated, but I'd like to obviously wait until more of us are vaccinated, especially our older staff who are starting to get eligible. And obviously if we're setting a date that's end of April or early May or something, things can obviously change based on these new variants. It's all kind of up in the air. I just wanted to have a plan in place that we know, the staff can wrap their heads around, get used to it, know what to expect. We can start to tell patrons this is what's coming, and then we can maybe set a tentative date with the mayor on Thursday of when this is going to be doable, and then go from there. But there are, 87 ducks that have to be put in a row before this is, we can unlock the doors to the public. But it's important to at least begin.
Kate, how's your staff with this whole plan, or have they seen it, or do they have any anxiety about opening and coming to work?
Yes, they do have anxiety. I've told some staff over the past week as we were figuring this out, we've talked to some people, and I think there's been an initial what do you mean you're just opening the floodgates and there's no appointments? And then as I explained the rationale, I think all of them thus far have said oh yeah, that actually does make sense. This is easier and safer and, cuts down on possible concerns between patrons and staff, and kind of makes it easier for patrons to come and do what they need and then leave. And there's definitely concern. There's definitely nerves because we've been doing this for a year.
Sure.
Without patrons in the building, and we see a ton of patrons every day. And I think there's definitely concern. I mean, I'm nervous as well, but I also know that we need to do this at some point because we do serve the public.
How are you planning to roll this out with the staff to get them prepared and feel more comfortable with it?
I think that just tell them that, trust me, I think that they can see that Assistant Director Hayden and I have worked our butts off, pardon me,
Yeah.
for saying, over the past year to keep them as safe as possible. And, some of the rules that we have in terms of mask wearing and distancing are a little draconian and intense, but they work. And we take this very seriously. We are not the people to say like, it's fine, you'll be fine.
It shows in the presentation how serious you take this.
We take this very seriously. I mean, and as I speak, my daughter is in preschool and there was a positive case in her classroom last week. So right now we're doing the COVID exposure waiting game with my husband and my 3-year-old and myself. Like I take this very seriously, and this is very not a joke, and this is not a game.
Is there anything that can help alleviate some of the anxiety to let them know how good this plan is?
I think that your support makes a big deal. I think that, Al and I, Assistant Director Hayden and I, do a lot of this planning where we're stuck. It's the two of us who think about this literally 28 hours a day, and we go back and forth on this all the time. And it's really helpful to bring this to people who are not in our heads, who still understand the needs for this, understand the buildings, understand how the library works, but have an outside view. And we have definitely talked to staff about certain aspects of this. It's come up in conversation, and definitely we'll be having more and more conversations with people going forward. But it's a process to get people used to, it's literally asking people to go outside of their comfort zone where they have been in the library as a safe space for the last year, basically. But I trust that everybody will understand that we really truly believe and think this is the safest and best way to do this. And we're not rushing things. I'm not saying let's open in 2 weeks and just hope it works. We're not going to open until all of these 87 ducts are in a row and technology has been installed and plexiglass has been installed and everybody is ready to do it. But I think it's important to at least start the conversation, start the process, start the stuff, buying the stuff, the thousands of dollars of stuff we need, and then work on setting a tentative date, Tom, with the mayor, and go from there.
Just for my knowledge here, if anybody on the board understands, will we at some point when this comes out of draft mode have to make a motion to approve this, or will this be able to go forward without our approval? Does anybody on the board know?
I would like an approval.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful.
Rick, go ahead.
Kate, we need to approve this.
Yeah. All right. So what I'm thinking, Kate, is Rick, you're breaking up. I just talked over you. I'm sorry. That wasn't intended. Go ahead, please. Rick, go ahead.
No, I stopped talking.
Okay. So Kate, after our meeting, yeah, you're still going, Rick. I'm sorry. I keep talking over you. I can't hear you, Rick. Go ahead.
No, I stopped talking, Tom.
Oh,
go ahead.
all right. Thank you. So Kate, you'll make some updates to this.
Yes.
We'll have a meeting on Thursday with the mayor. You'll present him this plan. And then after at that point, you're going to look for approval from this board to go forward with it. Okay. Thank you. I just want to know how this is all going to happen.
And I think at that point, it'll probably be I'd like to get this approved before the April meeting, unless we have to do horrible things. But I'd like to get this approved before the April meeting, so I'll probably request an email vote on that probably next week.
Absolutely.
Again, fantastic work on this. I'm very impressed at all the details that you have covered. Is there any more questions for Kate? And Kate, is there anything more you need to say?
I just need to go over the face covering policy quickly.
Okay. I thought, was that Kate O'Brien wrote this? Is that hers, or is that?
No, this is from Assistant Director Hayden and myself.
I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
It's pretty basic. It basically says that in alignment with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and CDC guidance, face coverings are required for all individuals over the age of 2. Actually, it should not say while in public areas. That should say in total, the Peabody Institute libraries. Visitors are expected, and we added specifically regardless of vaccination status. I think this spring, there is obviously still CDC guidelines that say you must still wear a mask even if you've been fully vaccinated. But I think as more and more people get vaccinated, that guidance will start to be less and less perhaps paid attention to. And I can't think of anything that would make my staff less comfortable than having somebody come in without a mask on and say, oh, but trust me, I'm vaccinated. And maybe they are, but that would, I think, make it a very unpleasant place for everybody. So I think we need to stick with the CDC guidelines and say, I understand you're vaccinated. That's great. I'm jealous. Congratulations. But unfortunately, face masks still need to be worn in the library until that guidance changes. Visitors are expected to have their own face covering. If they do not have one, we will have a limited supply available, and that will be at all the entryways. Visitors who cannot wear a face covering should contact the library to discuss. Otherwise, the libraries can meet your service needs so we can provide accommodations for people. And then it'll remain in place until guidance lifts, basically the current restrictions. And then some common questions. Why are we required to wear face coverings? Do I have to wear the face covering the entire time in the library? Yes. Don't take it off. Will face coverings really protect me? Do I need to wear a mask and avoid close contact even after receiving 2 doses of the vaccine? And then how long would the policy be in effect? And all the sources of that are on the CDC website. It's basically copied and pasted from the CDC website. I think it's pretty cut and dry. There's really no exceptions, as there should not be, I don't think. We'll offer you a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, for whatever reason, you'll be asked to leave because you're not following the library policies. And so I think it's really important that we have this policy in place so that I have something, there's something citable if somebody is not able to wear a mask. And again, we will offer whatever accommodations we can. We'll bring your holds out to you. We can offer you a Chromebook to use in the courtyard if you need to use our Wi-Fi in the courtyard. We have accommodations set up for pretty much everything. But we do need to have a policy so that there is something we can cite if there's an issue.
Was there any corrections to this policy?
Yeah, just the top, it says in alignment with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the face coverings are required for all individuals over the age of 2. It says while in public areas of the Peabody Institute Library. It should just say while in the Peabody Institute Library.
Okay, so
without the public areas phrase.
If somebody would like, you asked in your executive report, the director's report earlier, to approve both of these things, the reopening plan and the face coverings policy. You said, well, you're going to make some changes to the reopening plan. I don't know if you want to accept any motions this evening for approval with amendments.
You know what? If it's easier for everybody, I'll just make this one little change to this one and send it out with the reopening plan as well.
Okay.
Probably just easier to do it that way.
I have a question about visitors who cannot wear a face mask. I mean, I just wonder if that doesn't set us up for some kind of a discrimination situation.
Well, that's why we offer the accommodations. That's why they're
yeah, but I think, for example, if you go to the supermarket and without a mask and say you can't, they can't ask you any questions about why not or anything, and they just have to let you in. I wonder if we're in that.
Not all places do that, though. It differs supermarket to supermarket.
I disagree.
I know. I just offer that as an example. Are we setting ourselves up for some kind of problem here? By somebody could make a fuss.
Right. That's why we need a policy to cite. Otherwise, people will just be able to wander around without masks on, which is dangerous.
Okay. Yeah, I just raised that question.
Rick, did you have something to say?
I mean, given the litigiousness of our society these days.
Yeah.
Can
Rick,
you hear me
you're
now?
You're on mute,
Yeah,
Rick.
there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have not seen any place where you can go in without a mask. Period. So I don't know. I think
Well, you can say I have a medical condition that makes me unable to wear a mask.
Right.
And
so
they
that's
don't
why-
let you in.
And they can't ask you what
That's
it
why-
is or proof.
By having a policy that states you must wear a mask or we offer you accommodation, that's why.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
then we can actually help the people who are not doing it to be difficult. We can we have accommodations in place. We can bring your holds to you. We can bring you a Chromebook to use. We can get books for you. We can make copies for you. We can actually print stuff for you. we do have accommodations for these things. If somebody wants to push it past that, then they're probably doing that everywhere they go. But we need a policy.
Yes.
This is a pretty common policy among libraries as well. I think every library that's open has the same policy. They'll offer accommodations, but they still require a mask going in. This is pretty common. And I would, and Tom, we can talk to the mayor on Thursday, but I imagine there's a similar policy at City Hall as well. But we can double check though with City Hall.
Yeah.
Yep. Tom, I just wanted to jump in for a second, if I may.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I think that all sorts of places have signs that say no shirt, no shoes, no service. Well, I think that if that's legal, I think that we'll be fine with that. And I commend the fact that the director and assistant director and some other staff probably have made up this thing. They have other alternatives. I think that's all we can do. And I wouldn't worry much more than that about it. But I did have one point to bring up. I was listening to all the cleaning services, et cetera. And I know there's supplies for basic cleaning, but do the custodians have any access to any of those steam or mist cleaners that they have where they whip right through quickly? Is that something they have access to?
We do have one, and it's done every
All
Friday.
right. All right, thank you. You're way ahead of me. Good.
I don't do it. Sean Meager, one of our custodians, does that every Friday.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for the policy and the reopening plan, Director Merlin. So that was under new business. Is there anything else under new business? Okay. Hearing. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, so the way I understand it, we're allowed to make a motion to accept these policies as amended.
So what Director Merlin said is that she would like to make the changes if it's okay with everybody, and then we'll do an email vote. It might be a little bit more efficient that way. Is that okay?
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
And I will note which things have been specific. I won't make you, scour them looking for, a typo taken out. I'll note which changes I've made and which amendments I've made to it.
Okay. That was unfinished business. I'm sorry, new business, everybody. We're into resolution, which I guess we don't have anything there, right? Is there anything we're missing? Okay. Number 9, agenda item number 9. Sorry, that sounds like the Beatles, right? Any matter suggested by a trustee to the library director prior to the issuance of the notice of an agenda. There hasn't been any, I don't believe. And number 10, any matter suggested by any person in writing to the library director prior to the issuance of the notice of agenda of the meeting containing a title and description of the agenda item. I haven't heard anything there either. Okay, so thank you very much for that. Again, that detailed plan, I'm impressed by it. A lot of work and a lot of thought into that. And the staff as well as Assistant Director Al Hayden. And thank you, Catherine McGrath, for taking all the minutes for our meeting. And I think we're at the end of our agenda here, everybody. So the time is 8:26. We went a little bit over tonight. There's a lot of material that we had to hear. But at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion for to end the meeting.
So moved.
Adjournment. Thank you, Don.
Second.
Thank you, Anne. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's have a vote here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Kate.
Good night.